I think that one of the problems related to our research and activity is to try to answer to a series of questions that are: why to collect data? What data should we collect? How can we use computers? What to do with the collected data, and what are the issues? Now, we all know what's the history of data collection in the medical fields. We end up with this, we end up with this. The reason for this is that there is a need to collect data, but over the years, the rush to keep pace with advances in technology, the need of substantiating quality of centered care, implementing KDOQI or KDIGO guidelines, dialysis is one of the most quantitative fields, and progressive increase in patient number and files, the desire to become paperless made us to computerize. Now, we know today that precision CRRT have demonstrated that large randomized trials provide limited evidence because KDIGO guidelines are very often opinion-based, and controversy remains. The new trials gave no definitive answers, and so the best solution for every patient may not exist, as it doesn't exist the best insulin dose. So we need to collect data from single patients and from specific population to enable us to perform precision medicine. This was the actually content of the 17 Acute Disease Quality Initiative meeting, and the precision medicine concept was to take into account individual differences, targeting illness by selecting drugs and those specifically for an individual, and using CRRT for specific patients, using their patient information to personalize treatment prescription. Now, patient needs change over time, so we need a dynamic prescription, and in this framework, therefore, the rationale for application of therapies require more the analysis of pathophysiological foundations of a single mechanism and patients rather than looking at large trials. There is an apparent controversy in this because from one side we have big data, on the other thing we have single electronic medical records. But actually, this kind of paradox is only apparent because the two approaches tend to be integrated, generating precision medicine, and the base for this is computer-based data collection. So I think that in general, we reached the consensus that there is a need to understand what is the difference between patient capacity and patient demand in terms of blood purification. And this, in most of the cases, is what states the moment to begin treatment. So why is it important to have a consensus on terminology and nomenclature? To increase safety, to increase accuracy and efficiency, to attain a shared language among all parties, to uniform clinical research and data reporting, to facilitate communication technological progress. If we don't have a common language, we may collect data that become meaningless. So we did the Carta of Vicenza, where the Nomenclature Standardization Alliance included several companies trying to use similar terminology or harmonized terminology to feed electronic medical records. And more we have complex therapies now that may require this integrated system to provide specific coded information. For example, we wrote this editorial, Timing of Renal Replacement Therapy. It's the moment for precision medicine. But precision medicine can only apply if we have adequate information on what is the disease burden, the solute load, the volume load in one side, and what is the capacity of the kidney in terms of function. The discrepancy between capacity and demand is what creates the gap that requires to be filled by blood purification. So question on solid control, for example, is what is the ideal method to prescribe and measure delivered CRRT? What are the effects of delivered dose? Can precision modification have an impact on outcome? And finally, what are the quality measures? For example, we know that there is a dose response curve until a breaking point in which we reach a plateau, and increase in dose does not result in further improvement in outcome. We know that we have a tendency to deliver less than what we prescribe. So, for example, if you prescribe a 25 milliliter per kilogram per hour, which is approximately a kT/V per day of 1, if you have fluid overload, this fluid overload may severely impair the effective delivery because of the larger volume of distribution. The same is true for treatment downtime that significantly affect the effective delivery compared to the prescribed dose. And again, when we talk about computer data collection, we are not talking about simple records, but we are talking about online, immediate data collection that may affect the decision maker to decide to modify the amount of dose delivered or the net ultrafiltration in the patient, so that we have patients that keeps moving back and forward from area of low or high solid control needs and require adjustment of the dose. We have different indicators, including ratio between delivery and prescription, effective treatment time, solid specific indicators like urea reduction ratio or kT/V, and quality measures to monitor the dose and solid control. The level of evidence, as you can see, is not so high, but still is the only thing we have. And I think that CRT technology and bedside electronic health records should be leveraged to reliably and routinely calculate quality measures. So we have question now on adequacy, because we do not know how to define adequacy in a patient, and we have proposed a multidimensional approach in which we create a record of several different aspects that go from nutrition to coagulation, control of sepsis, fluid balance, and so on. So any treatment that does not have a completely rounded radar graph may be inadequate in one or two of specific aspects. Okay, so the prescription goes through a certain, let's say, target of quality measures that lead to identification of specific, let's say, target parameters in the treatment. Delivery is then monitored, outcomes are monitored, and then there is a clinical and technical reassessment for modifying the prescription. This can only be done, of course, if you have some electronic help. We know the patient, in terms of uremia, volume, and homeostasis, may be far from the homeostatic line, but our target is to bring the patient as close as possible to the final line. And if the patient has a time average deviation from this physiological line, then we have to intervene. That's why the role of technology has been identified not only in the phase of risk assessment with biomarkers and electronic medical records. Remember, I would like to remind you that at the Mayo Clinic, for example, they have electronic sniffers, and we are implementing that as well, that may help characterizing the patient, to make the clinical diagnosis, and finally to make the indications with the decision to start prescription, identifying specific targets, including dose, volume, homeostasis, organ support. Then at this point, your prescription should be made and delivery should be monitored, and finally, probably going back to the decision to modify prescription if the target are not reached. This require an integrated data evaluation of CRT plus electronic medical records. And this is the algorithm that ADKI group indicated. Once you admit the patient to the ICU, you monitor AKI, you personalize the evaluation of demand capacity, you choose the therapy, And of course, then you move to the choosing the therapy targets, volume, solute removal, and so on. Choose the modality, vascular access, machine, filter, anticoagulation, and so on. Choose therapy settings, start delivering, collecting the data, and evaluating the data for continuous dynamic modification. Many of these machines today are equipped with systems to record and implement data. The most interesting aspect, I think, for new machines is that when you look at the target of physiological parameters, these machines tend to bring the patient as close as possible to physiology. But technology can help in, let's say, very fine-tuned of modification. And when the trend of a patient tends to be making him far from the physiological targets, then at this point you reevaluate, you intervene, you change prescription. And this is what assisted dynamic prescription can help. How can a computer help in this case? We're integrating clinical laboratory measurement, patient data, signals from the machine in a combined data signal expert analysis that may lead to a feedback again into the machine. Now, this machine can have a nurse manual biofeedback, can have a nurse authorized biofeedback. In other words, the machine suggests a change and the nurse authorizes this. And finally, in some cases, we have fully automatic biofeedback. In some of these machines, you have today the trend towards minimizing this area, which is the discrepancy between delivery and prescription in terms of different parameters. Now, we have the possibility to use information communication technology, using data from the machine, using data from the patient, having information from the environment, and having information related to outcome. Today, the possibilities to collect data has been somehow revolutionized by the fact that in the past we could only do this offline and using patient cards, for example, and therefore have an offline evaluation of data. Subsequently, we tried to have a direct feeding of a patient database and resident medical records, and today, through virtual private networks and encrypted tunnel system, we could have cloud connectivity. And this is what we have recently tested in our own department, where a particular cloud-based data collection offers us the possibility to gather online data from the patient, from the machine, and record them, enabling us to perform statistics on filter life, treatment downtime, prescribed versus delivery dose, fluid removal parameters, alarm management, and having a summary that is very good for reporting. We have also timing of CRRT initiation, fluid overload and management, ventilator and vasopressor duration, CRRT initiation versus KDIGO AKI stage, frequency of renal replacement therapy after CRRT, so no recovery, and again, summaries. I think that this is a very important thing because you can access from any computer station, provided you make a login accurate. So computer-assisted data acquisition is important. But what do we do with the acquired data? I think that we also have to have a computer-assisted data management, which is exactly what I provided you with the example of cloud-based system. The general concept of data collection is to have a parameter, to measure it, then to make the analysis, to evaluate an intervention, and to go back to the modification of the parameter. This will allow us for continuous quality improvement, for example, blood flow, quality assurance program, online clearance, hardware maintenance, alarm of failure, statistical analysis, number of failure, saline infusion, ultrafiltration, or off pump, and so on. Billing, of course, accountability, the medical director or whoever, and research, clinical trials, in particular pragmatic trials are capable to be done. Computer-assisted data management may be applied to a single session, and single patient history or a centered population. And as in this case, for example, body weight can be studied, blood pressure, weight, and so on, or arterial pressure, venous pressure in the system. But you can also analyze single station, single patient, facility, or even a network, creating the possibility to do an effective pragmatic trial. For a single station, you can have information like hours of use, mean time between failures, maintenance, quality assurance, and so on. For a patient, demographic data down to social condition after ICU discharge. For data management in the facility, you can actually have a policy evaluation. And finally, in a network, you can standardize approach in different centers, evaluating single-center performance versus the average. So this is what has been proposed also in terms of fluid management. Precision, for example, fluid removal intends to have information on removal, refilling, and possible imbalances. Of course, distinguishing between what is the CRRT fluid balance from the patient fluid balance that require more information. The recommendations of ADKI at the end was that new technological advances should help clinicians to optimize prescription, delivery, and results evaluation. So precision medicine somehow combines standardization and personalization in CRRT. This is an example of how the information can be gathered at the bedside of the patient and how you can provide consult, maybe from remote areas while enjoying a little bit of sun. Thank you very much.